Welcome to the Newsletter Growth Lab, the show where we unpack the art and science of growing a loyal audience, one subscriber at a time. Whether you're just starting your newsletter or already have thousands of readers, this podcast is designed to help you build, engage, and monetize your list with proven strategies and stories from the trenches. Today, we're diving deep into what it really takes to build an audience from scratch. No fluff, no shortcuts, just real talk.
I still remember the first time I hit publish on an article. There were no expectations, no followers, just me and a screen filled with hope. That post about Google Ads was rough, unpolished, and very beginner, but it pulled in 3,000 views and 6 comments. It felt like lightning. Not because it went viral, but because someone actually read it.
And that one moment changed everything. I kept writing. Every week. Even when there were no comments, no clicks, no shares. The habit became the reward. 4 years later, I had written over 350 articles, earned 21,000 followers, and found a rhythm I didn't know I had in me.
The silence in the early stages is brutal. You wonder if your voice matters, if you're wasting time. But that silence trains you. You start to write not for applause, but for clarity. For the one person who might need to hear it. That shift changes the game entirely.
Then came the shift to email. I started a newsletter. No fireworks. Just a list of 27 people, most of whom were friends. But every week I showed up in their inbox. I wrote about what I was learning, and slowly some strangers subscribed. That was the real win.
The breakthrough wasn't in going viral. It was in going deep. When I had 1,200 subscribers, I noticed something powerful. Those people actually cared. They opened, replied, and acted on what I shared. That kind of audience is way more valuable than 50,000 passive readers.
Of course, I made mistakes. I pivoted more times than I can count. I killed my list more than once, rebranded the newsletter, changed directions, and each pivot hurt. But it also helped me get closer to what resonated, growing and monetizing content websites.
When you finally lock into your niche, it feels like you've come home. The content flows easier. Readers respond more often. You're not fighting upstream anymore. That clarity is addictive. You start writing with confidence instead of confusion.
I focused on trust, not hacks, not gimmicks, just showing up with honesty and results-backed strategies. If I hadn't tested it, or used it myself, I didn't share it. That created credibility, and that's something no algorithm can fake.
The mistake many creators make? Spreading themselves too thin. I chose to double down on what worked. Medium, Beehive, and my own site. Sure, I was on Quora and Reddit too, but I gave my best to the platforms where people actually cared. That's how momentum builds.
When I began storytelling, everything shifted. Instead of just sharing tips, I started sharing why those tips mattered to me. I'd open with a moment of failure or a small win. Readers related to the realness, and that's when replies started pouring in.
One reader told me, "This felt like you were writing just for me." That stuck with me. So I leaned into that. I wasn't trying to impress anymore. I was trying to connect. And connection scales way better than clicks.
I made it a point to give before I asked. I shared tools I'd built, SEO checklists, growth case studies, all free. I wanted to earn trust, not transactions. And when I did finally launch paid content, people didn't hesitate. They knew I delivered value.
Some of my best performing emails were the most vulnerable ones. Sharing burnout, mistakes, experiments that flopped. People respect expertise, but they bond over honesty. It's counterintuitive, but being imperfect made my content more impactful.
Engagement became my North Star. I wasn't chasing followers anymore. I was chasing conversations. I asked readers to reply with their goals, their pain points. And when they did, I replied to every single one. That's how community starts.
Not every piece was a home run. In fact, most weren't. But showing up consistently taught me which ideas had legs and which didn't. Audience building is a slow burn, not a fireworks show. If you're in it for the long haul, patience becomes your secret weapon.
Eventually, I stopped obsessing over numbers and started focusing on resonance. Was the content helpful? Did it spark a reaction? Did it get shared? If one person found it valuable enough to forward, that meant more than 100 passive opens.
Monetization didn't happen overnight. I tried affiliate links, ebooks, paid newsletters. Some worked, some flopped. But I documented every step. That transparency became part of the value. Readers followed along, learned from my wins and losses.
There's this myth that you need a huge audience to make money. But I learned the opposite. A small engaged group, people who trust you, is more powerful than a massive list that doesn't open your emails. Focus on depth, not width.
Looking back, it's crazy how the smallest actions added up. One article led to a subscriber. One reply led to a conversation. One conversation led to a customer. You don't need to go viral. You just need to keep showing up.
Momentum comes from motion, not planning. I spent way too long in the early days thinking about strategy instead of executing. But once I started publishing regularly, imperfectly, things started happening. Clarity came after action.
People often ask, how do I find my voice? The truth is, you find it by using it. I wrote hundreds of posts before I figured out what truly resonated. Each one was a representative, a data point, a step closer to clarity.
I stopped trying to sound smart and started sounding like myself. That shift changed everything. When people read your content and hear your voice, not a watered-down version of someone else's, you start attracting the right audience.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned? You can't outsource the early stages. It's tempting to delegate the writing, the branding, the editing, but your voice is your fingerprint. If you don't shape it yourself, it won't resonate. I treated my newsletter like a product. I shipped it every week, improved it based on feedback, and constantly iterated. I experimented with subject lines, CTAs, visuals, everything. It wasn't just a newsletter, it was a learning lab.
The more I shared specific stories, here's how I failed. Here's how I got 500 subscribers in 30 days. Here's how I lost them again. The more trust I earned. Specificity builds credibility. Vagueness builds doubt.
Even the way I formatted my emails mattered. Short sentences, clear headlines, skimmable structure. People are busy. Respect their time. Make your content easy to read, even if it's long.
I also made it a point to highlight other creators. Interviews, shoutouts, guest features. It wasn't just about building my audience, it was about building a network. Reciprocity works wonders in this space.
One thing that helped massively? Creating a system, a publishing calendar, a backlog of drafts, templates for recurring segments. The more friction I removed, the more consistent I became. Consistency compounds.
And when it finally clicked, that this was bigger than just writing emails, I stopped seeing myself as just a writer. I was building a brand, a business, a platform for others to grow with me. That shift changed my posture completely.
That mindset shift, from creator to operator, was crucial. I started thinking like a builder, not just a content machine. Every email became a brick. Every reply, a layer of trust. I wasn't just sending newsletters. I was building equity.
I became obsessed with retention. It's easy to focus on growth and forget about keeping people around, but churn hurts. So I asked myself, why would someone unsubscribe? And how do I make sure they never want to?
The answer was simple but hard. Keep delivering value. Every email had to earn its place. No fluff, no filler. If I wouldn't want to read it, I didn't send it. That standard kept me focused and my list engaged.
At some point, I realized that value doesn't always mean more. Sometimes it means shorter, more focused. I started writing fewer ideas, but going deeper. That shift actually improved open rates and reply rates.
Not everything was planned. Some of my best performing emails came from last-minute thoughts. A tweet thread I expanded. A question I answered for a reader. Sometimes spontaneity brings freshness your audience didn't know they needed.
I leaned heavily into segmentation. I didn't treat my list like one giant blob. I tagged people by interest, SEO, newsletters, growth hacks. That allowed me to send tailored content, and my engagement doubled.
One lesson I learned the hard way: don't promise what you can't sustain. I once said I'd send 2 emails a week, and burned out in 3 weeks. Since then, I underpromise and overdeliver. It keeps things sustainable.
People don't just want tactics. They want to feel something. I started infusing more emotion into my writing. Not just what I did, but how it felt. The nerves, the wins, the doubt. That emotional arc kept readers hooked.
I also started asking better questions. Instead of, "What did you think?" I'd ask, "What's one thing you're struggling with right now in growing your audience?" That led to more meaningful replies and gave me better content ideas too.
Eventually, this community became self-sustaining. Readers shared with others. Some even asked if they could sponsor or collaborate. That's when I knew I had built something real. Something that mattered beyond metrics.
I think people underestimate how powerful word of mouth still is. You can run ads and game algorithms, but if someone forwards your newsletter to a friend with the message, "You'll love this," that's gold. That's trust transferred.
That kind of trust comes from consistency. Not just in publishing, but in tone, values, and delivery. People want to know what they're signing up for, and that they can count on it. The moment you start feeling unpredictable, you lose them.
I also started repurposing content. One newsletter could become a LinkedIn post, a Twitter thread, a carousel, even a short YouTube script. Same core idea, different packaging. That made growth more efficient and less overwhelming.
The repurposing wasn't lazy. It was smart. People consume content in different ways. Someone might skip my email, but catch the same message in a tweet or a reel. That kind of omnipresence helps people remember you.
But I was careful not to overdo it. Repeating ideas is fine. Repeating them badly isn't. Each format had to feel native. If it's a Twitter thread, I made it punchy. If it's a blog post, I expanded. I respected the medium.
One of the best decisions I made was investing in design. Cleaner headers, better visuals, simple branding. Even just having a consistent logo and typeface made the newsletter feel more legit. And people noticed.
People want to share things that look good. A great design won't save bad content, but good content wrapped in thoughtful design? That's how you get shared, screenshotted, bookmarked. I made my newsletters screenshot-worthy.
I used to think growth was about going viral. Now I realize it's about being unforgettable to the right people. I don't need millions. I need 1,000 true fans who trust me, buy from me, and spread the word. That's the real win.
To build those relationships, I started treating my list like a circle of friends. I'd reply to replies, ask questions, remember names, celebrate milestones. Those human touches aren't scalable, but they're unforgettable.
And I tracked everything. Open rates, click rates, reply volume. But I never let the numbers make me robotic. If a high-performing email didn't feel right, I wouldn't replicate it. Gut and data have to work together.
Over time, I learned that growth isn't a straight line. It's a series of plateaus and spikes. Some weeks feel flat, others explode. The key is not quitting during the flat weeks. That's where most people give up.
During those plateaus, I doubled down on learning. I studied what others were doing. I reverse-engineered successful newsletters. Not to copy, but to understand. What made their content sticky? What kept people coming back?
Sometimes I'd reach out to those creators directly. Not to pitch anything, just to thank them or ask a genuine question. And you'd be surprised how often they reply. That's another growth channel people ignore. Relationships.
The best collaborations I've done came from simple conversations. A reply, a compliment, a shared post. Relationships compound. Just like content does. Every time you connect with another builder, your reach expands organically.
When I felt stuck creatively, I'd run experiments. Change the format. Try a Q&A. Run a giveaway. ask readers to contribute. It kept things fresh, for them and for me. And sometimes those experiments became permanent features.
I once ran a subscriber spotlight where I featured a reader's business every month. Not only did it boost engagement, but it made people excited to open emails. They felt seen. That kind of connection can't be bought.
Another turning point came when I built a welcome sequence. Instead of just sending a weekly newsletter, I had an onboarding flow. Introducing myself, setting expectations, delivering early value. That's when retention improved dramatically.
Most creators focus on the next email. I started focusing on the first email. First impressions matter. That welcome email sets the tone for the relationship. I rewrote it a dozen times until it finally clicked.
Eventually, I started thinking about my list as a funnel. Not in the salesy way, but in the clarity way. What's the journey I want a subscriber to go on? From stranger to reader to fan to customer. Each email played a role in that path.
Once I had that journey mapped out, writing became easier. Each week wasn't just a random post. It was a step in a larger arc. That made my content more purposeful, more cohesive, and way more valuable over time.
That sense of narrative made a huge difference. Instead of throwing random ideas at the wall, I was taking my audience on a journey. Every topic built on the last. Every insight connected to a bigger goal. It made the content more binge-worthy.
And when people binge your emails, they don't just stay, they convert. I started getting messages like, "I just read 15 of your past newsletters in one sitting." That kind of obsession isn't luck. It's built through flow, structure, and voice.
I also started including more behind-the-scenes content. Not just what I was teaching, but what I was doing. Revenue breakdowns, open rate stats. What I was trying, testing, tweaking. That vulnerability created even deeper trust.
It made me more relatable, too. When I shared the story of a launch that completely flopped, I thought people would unsubscribe. Instead, I got thank you emails. Turns out, honesty is magnetic. People want the real story.
Of course, not every experiment worked. Some ideas completely bombed. But I always shared the lessons. And readers appreciated that. It became clear, they weren't just there for tactics. They were there to grow with me.
I also started thinking about audience layering. My newsletter wasn't just one layer, it was the core. Around it were Twitter, blog posts, digital products, community. Everything led back to the email. That was the engine.
The newsletter became my hub. No matter where someone found me, Reddit, Medium, X, they always landed on my email list. That made growth more sustainable. Algorithms could change, platforms could fade. But I owned the list.
And because I owned it, I could build with confidence. No fear of shadow bans or reach throttles. That ownership gave me leverage, especially when launching products or pitching collaborations. Email isn't dead. It's underrated.
Eventually, I built out automations, nurture sequences, course launches, seasonal flows. It was like building a machine that worked even when I wasn't writing, but I made sure it still felt personal. No one likes robotic emails.
At this point, the newsletter was no longer just content. It was a business asset. It opened doors, it built authority, it made money. But most importantly, it created impact. That's why I kept writing, even on the hard days.
And the hard days do come. Writer's block, burnout, self-doubt. There were weeks I stared at a blinking cursor, unsure what to say. But the habit of shipping kept me going. I wasn't writing for perfection. I was writing for progress.
Some weeks, I'd pull inspiration from a conversation I had, or a question a subscriber asked, or a tweet that sparked debate. Content is everywhere once you train your brain to see it. And once I did, the ideas never stopped flowing.
But I still needed space to recharge. I started scheduling breaks, batching content in advance, and taking mental health seriously. Burnout helps no one. Not me, not my readers. Sustainability became part of my growth strategy.
Eventually, I created a content vault, A Notion page with dozens of unused ideas, partially written drafts, headlines I liked. It became my safety net. If I was ever stuck, I had a well to pull from. That made consistency feel less stressful.
I also refined how I tracked success. Instead of obsessing over open rates or subscriber count, I asked, did this message help someone? Did it spark a reply? Did it lead to a meaningful action? That kind of feedback was worth more than any dashboard.
Over time, I noticed trends. The topics that sparked the most replies usually weren't the clever ones. They were the honest ones. Here's something I struggled with. Here's a mistake I made. That kind of real talk cut through the noise.
As trust deepened, monetization became more natural. I didn't need hard sells. I'd share what I was working on, an ebook, a course, a cohort, and people would ask to buy it. Not because I pitched them hard, but because I'd earned their trust over time.
And when someone buys from you, they're not just buying a product. They're buying belief. Belief that you can help them get where they want to go. That belief only happens when you show up consistently and care.
That's what makes newsletters so powerful. You're not just dropping content, you're building relationships. And relationships create momentum. Every reply, every forward, every, hey, I love your stuff, adds fuel to the fire.
Looking back, I realized the magic wasn't in the hacks or the tactics. It was in the commitment, the willingness to keep going, to keep showing up, to keep learning. That's what audience building really is, a journey of showing up.
The beautiful thing about showing up is that it compounds. What feels slow in the beginning suddenly snowballs. Readers start referencing old emails. They reply to stories you forgot you told. That's how you know you're building memory in your brand.
I also noticed how important rhythm is, not just in publishing frequency, but in how each email feels. A cold open, a personal story, a tactical breakdown, a strong close. That rhythm becomes familiar, and familiarity breeds loyalty.
At some point, I stopped seeing readers as the list. These were real people, creators, builders, parents, freelancers. I started imagining the person on the other side of the screen and writing to them directly. One person, not thousands.
It's funny, but once I wrote like that, my audience grew faster. Intimacy scales better than virality. The more personal I got, the more people shared the newsletter, because it felt like it was written for them, and them alone.
The newsletter also became a place for reflection. I'd write things I didn't even fully understand until I saw them typed out. It became part journal, part teaching tool. Writing helped me think more clearly, and thinking clearly helped me lead.
Eventually, I leaned into frameworks. I'd test a system for 30 days, document the process, and turn it into a shareable breakdown. Readers loved it. It gave structure to the chaos, and structure is something most creators crave.
But I always came back to the story. The framework is the skeleton, but the story is the soul. A tactic without context is forgettable. A tactic with a personal backstory? That's what sticks. That's what people remember.
One thing I never expected, readers becoming collaborators. Over time, some of the most engaged subscribers offered to co-create, co-host, even co-launch. Your audience isn't just consumers. They're future partners.
That's why I now see a newsletter not as a funnel, but as a flywheel. Trust leads to engagement. Engagement leads to collaboration. Collaboration leads to reach. And reach brings in more people to trust you. It feeds itself.
If you stick with it long enough, the growth becomes exponential, but only if you resist the urge to rush. That slow, steady build, that's where the real leverage lives. You're not just building an audience, you're building momentum.
Momentum feels subtle at first. It's not a viral spike. It's a smoother send-out. More replies than usual. A stranger quoting you on Twitter. It builds beneath the surface, quietly but persistently, until one day it's undeniable.
I remember hitting a point where I didn't need to chase growth anymore. Growth came to me. People found my newsletter through word of mouth, recommendations, and social proof. That's when I realized consistency creates gravity.
To keep that gravity, I had to stay intentional. I stopped publishing filler content just to stay on schedule. Instead, I focused on alignment. Does this email align with what I stand for? Is it solving a problem my readers care about?
That's when unsubscribes stopped bothering me. I started seeing them as signals, not failures. If someone left, it meant they weren't my ideal audience. And that's okay. A strong brand repels as much as it attracts.
I also refined my onboarding funnel during this time. I wrote a 5-day email sequence that told my story, delivered value, and invited new readers to engage. It wasn't salesy. It was personal. And it doubled my retention.
The onboarding sequence even included voice notes and behind-the-scenes screenshots. I wanted new readers to feel like they were getting a peek inside the lab, like they were part of something small but meaningful.
And once people feel like they belong, they show up differently. They reply more. They share more. They trust you more. That belonging is what transforms a casual subscriber into a loyal fan.
I didn't do it alone either. I asked my audience to help shape the newsletter. I'd include polls, open-ended questions, feedback forms, and I'd actually use their responses to guide future content. People felt heard, and that built loyalty.
At one point, I even ran an Ask Me Anything edition where I answered reader questions live via email. It broke the usual format, but the engagement was off the charts. It reminded me, sometimes breaking your own rules pays off.
And from there, the newsletter became more than a platform. It became a relationship engine, a way to turn ideas into action, strangers into fans, and emails into a thriving ecosystem of shared value.
Once it became a relationship engine, I realized the true asset wasn't just the audience. It was the attention. That consistent, focused attention from people who trust you? That's incredibly rare and incredibly powerful.
That's when I stopped thinking of myself as just a writer and started owning the role of creator-entrepreneur. The newsletter wasn't a side project anymore, it was the center of the brand. Every offer, product, and partnership started there.
I created a content ladder based on reader intent. Casual skimmers got bite-sized tips. Engaged readers got deep dives. Superfans got premium content. This approach let me meet people where they were, without overwhelming them.
And because I'd taken the time to build trust, even paid offers didn't feel pushy. In fact, readers asked for more ways to learn, go deeper, or work together. Monetization stopped feeling like selling and started feeling like service.
One of the best things I did during this phase was build a product suite that matched the newsletter's content. Instead of creating random offers, I asked myself, what's the next logical step for someone reading this?
That made each launch smoother. I didn't need to sell as hard because the content already sold the need. The newsletter educated, qualified, and warmed up the audience weeks in advance. Launches felt more like conversations.
To support that, I created a library of evergreen newsletters, emails that delivered timeless value. I automated these for new subscribers so they'd get value instantly, even if they joined on a random Tuesday.
That evergreen system didn't just save time, it actually improved reader experience. New subscribers felt like they were entering something structured, not chaotic. They trusted the process and stuck around longer.
I paired that with clear CTAs, whether to reply, download something, or check out a tool I recommended. I realized people want to be guided. They just need clarity. When I gave them that, engagement jumped.
All of this taught me that growth isn't an accident. It's a design. Every touchpoint matters. Every email is a chance to either connect deeper or confuse, and clarity wins every single time.
As I refined the design of my growth engine, I also realized how valuable feedback loops were. Every reply, every unsub, every click, it was a signal, not noise. And when I started paying closer attention, my writing got sharper.
I stopped trying to write for everyone. Instead, I focused on my people, the ones who loved the format, craved the insight, and felt seen in my stories. And when I did that, something incredible happened. Those people became advocates.
They didn't just read, They forwarded. They screenshotted. They tweeted quotes and recommended the newsletter in Slack groups and forums. I wasn't just building an audience. I was activating a street team. That kind of advocacy only comes when your content feels personal. I leaned into that by referencing past emails, replying with voice notes, even calling out longtime subscribers by name. I treated every inbox like sacred space. And once I started doing that, I didn't need complicated funnels. I didn't need manipulative tactics. Because real relationships scale differently. They move slower, but they last longer. And that's the kind of audience I wanted.
I also began tracking reader journeys, where they came from, which emails they opened, what links they clicked. Not to be creepy, but to better understand why they stuck around. That data helped me double down on what worked.
But the most surprising unlock? Community. Once I had a few hundred highly engaged readers, I created a private space for them. A Slack group where we could talk newsletter strategy in real time. That community deepened everything.
Inside that space, I learned faster. I saw what people were struggling with. I got ideas for content, products, partnerships, and I gave away everything I could. Templates, case studies, frameworks. That generosity came back tenfold.
People began referring others into the community. I started getting messages like, "Hey, a friend told me I have to join your list." That kind of organic growth is priceless. And it only happens when people feel ownership.
So I shifted my role again, from solo creator to facilitator. My job wasn't just to teach, but to spark conversations, to connect people, to create a space where the value didn't just come from me, but from each other.
That shift to facilitator unlocked a new layer of growth. I wasn't just building for readers anymore. I was building with them. Every conversation gave me insight. Every collaboration added momentum. It started to feel like a movement.
I saw firsthand how powerful shared goals can be. Everyone in that community wanted the same thing, to grow something meaningful. That common purpose fueled deeper engagement than any content upgrade or lead magnet ever could.
The content started to evolve too. I wrote less about what I knew and more about what I was exploring. The newsletter became a place to think out loud, to learn in public, and readers respected that vulnerability.
They'd reply with their own thoughts, counterpoints, suggestions. It turned one-way broadcasts into two-way dialogues. And in those dialogues, I discovered the deepest form of audience growth: co-creation.
Co-creation doesn't mean losing your voice. It means amplifying it with others. I'd take reader feedback and turn it into full newsletters. I'd run polls, build frameworks together, and even test ideas with my subscribers before launching.
That built trust in a way no sales pitch could. Readers didn't just consume the newsletter, they felt invested in it. And that emotional investment led to something rare: loyalty in a low-attention world.
I realized my job wasn't just to deliver value, it was to deliver momentum. Each email had to leave people better than it found them. Inspired, clearer, ready to take a small step forward. That's what makes a newsletter unforgettable.
And so I changed how I measured success. It wasn't just open rates or revenue anymore. It was, did someone take action because of this? Did I move someone 1 inch closer to their goal? If the answer was yes, I'd done my job.
The more I leaned into that mission, the more the newsletter grew organically. Not through hacks or ads, but through resonance. People don't share things that are good. They share things that feel true, useful, and timely.
And truthfully, that's what audience building is all about. It's not about scale. It's about service. If you serve people well enough, long enough, they become your growth engine, your retention plan, your marketing department, all in one.
As I embraced that philosophy of service, everything started to feel lighter. I didn't stress about competition or comparison anymore. Because I wasn't chasing trends. I was responding to needs, and needs are timeless.
That's when I started saying no to shortcuts, no to fake scarcity, no to clickbait, no to growth hacks that felt hollow. Instead, I focused on long-term trust. It's slower, yes, but way more stable when algorithms shift.
That trust translated into opportunities I never planned for. Podcasts, guest features, paid workshops. People would reach out saying, "I've been reading your newsletter for months, and I finally had to reach out." That's the long game working.
I started seeing my newsletter as a portfolio of proof. Every issue was a signal. This is how I think. This is what I care about. This is the kind of value I bring. It pre-sold my work better than any pitch deck ever could.
And it's funny. Once you start focusing on service, people start selling you. Subscribers would promote the newsletter on their own, invite me into communities, introduce me to collaborators. I wasn't marketing alone anymore.
I used to think growth required hustle. Now I know it requires alignment. When your message, your medium, and your mission line up, people feel it. And when people feel something, they act on it.
At that point, I didn't need to push anymore. I just needed to hold space. Space for ideas, for community, for shared momentum. The newsletter wasn't just a platform, it was an ecosystem. And ecosystems thrive when you nurture them.
So I slowed down in the right ways. I stopped chasing numbers for the sake of numbers. I revisited old content. I refined onboarding. I pruned my list to make it healthier. Growth isn't just addition. It's subtraction too.
That pruning helped me see who I was really serving. And when I dialed in on those people, the ones who replied, clicked, bought, and shared, I started writing directly to them. That clarity changed everything.
And here's what I noticed. The clearer I got on who I was writing for, the more those exact people showed up. Not because of tricks or tactics, but because the message finally had a mirror. They saw themselves in the content and stayed.
That kind of resonance is rare. But when it happens, you stop chasing attention and start attracting alignment. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to be clear and consistent enough for the right people to find you.
Clarity also meant simplifying. I removed sections from the newsletter that didn't serve the mission. No more fluff. No more filler. Just insights, stories, and action steps, and my audience responded with more opens, more clicks, more trust.
I started thinking of each newsletter like a tool. Not just something to read, but something to use. A mindset shift, a strategy, a framework. Something readers could apply immediately. That's when people started saving and sharing issues.
Over time, I noticed I was becoming part of my readers' routines. Monday morning, they expected me in their inbox. Friday afternoon, they'd open my roundup on the train ride home. That kind of embedded presence is how brands are built.
I never took that lightly. If someone gives you space in their day, treat it with respect. That meant no lazy writing, no half-baked thoughts. Every email had to earn its place. That's the contract you make when you hit send.
At the same time, I gave myself permission to grow, to try new segments, to share different parts of my life, to occasionally pivot the theme. Readers grow too, and your content should evolve with them. That evolution is how loyalty deepens.
I also started involving my readers in that evolution. I'd ask, what do you want more of? What's not landing? What's missing? And every time I listened, the content got better. The list wasn't just growing, it was maturing.
That maturity allowed me to launch new products. Digital courses, templates, even mini cohorts. And since I'd been building in public, the launches didn't feel like sales. They felt like gifts, like answers to questions people had already asked.
Because the truth is, your newsletter isn't just a channel. It's a feedback loop, a signal generator, a focus group. If you treat it like a living thing, it will show you what to build next, what to say, sell, or stop doing.
And when you listen closely enough, you stop guessing. You don't need to follow trends or copy others. Your own audience will tell you what they need. Your job is to have the humility to hear it and the courage to act on it.
One of the best decisions I made during that phase was carving out space for reader stories. I'd highlight how a subscriber implemented an idea, what results they got, and what they'd do differently. It turned theory into proof, and proof into momentum.
These stories created a ripple effect. Readers started seeing themselves not just in the newsletter, but part of it. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about what we were building together. And that shifted the energy completely.
I stopped seeing subscribers as passive and started seeing them as partners. They weren't just there to consume, they were there to build, test, explore. That change in mindset helped me shape a newsletter culture instead of just a content stream.
With culture came rituals, weekly themes, seasonal series, annual surveys, little rhythms that made the newsletter feel less like media and more like a club. Rituals give your audience something to anticipate, and anticipation fuels retention.
And that retention gave me stability. I wasn't chasing spikes or launches anymore. I could forecast revenue, plan launches months in advance, collaborate without scrambling. A steady audience is a creator's most underappreciated asset.
But stability didn't mean stagnation. I constantly tested new content formats, mini audio drops, embedded tools, swipe files. Some flopped, some stuck. But the ongoing experimentation kept the newsletter dynamic and engaging.
When I found something that worked, I doubled down. A swipe file that performed well became a series. A framework that got replies became a mini course. A single paragraph sparked an entire product. The best ideas often start small.
That's the beauty of newsletters. You get to test fast, fail quietly, and scale intentionally. Unlike social media, where everything is loud and fleeting, email gives you room to breathe, to iterate, to actually build.
And the more I leaned into that, the more confident I became in trusting my own instincts. I stopped copying what big names were doing and focused on what felt right for my audience. That intuition was hard-earned, but invaluable. In the end, what worked wasn't tactics. It was truth. Showing up, being real, and giving a damn. You don't need to be a guru. You just need to be generous, consistent, and a little bit obsessed with helping people win.
Helping people win became the North Star. Whether it was teaching them a new growth strategy, helping them land their first sponsor, or just giving them the confidence to hit send, that impact was the real reward.
And when you focus on helping people win, they remember. They tell their friends. They stick around. They associate your name with progress. That kind of brand equity can't be bought. It's earned, one helpful email at a time.
I also learned to celebrate the small wins. A reader who landed their first 100 subscribers. Someone who wrote their first newsletter after procrastinating for a year. These moments mattered, and highlighting them made everyone feel seen.
Celebrating others took the spotlight off me and put it where it belonged, on the community. That shift created more trust, more momentum, and a deeper sense of belonging. And people stay where they feel seen and supported.
At one point, I realized my newsletter wasn't just helping creators, it was helping me. It gave me structure, purpose, clarity. It turned my scattered thoughts into systems, and my experiments into value others could apply.
That's when I began documenting everything. Launches, workflows, failures, even my writing process, and packaging that into resources. Because if something helped me, it could help someone else too. And that's how real leverage is built.
By then, the newsletter had become a growth machine for everything I touched. Want to launch a new product? Start with the list. Want to test an idea? Send an email. Want honest feedback? Ask your readers.
No gatekeepers, no ad spend. Just trust, consistency, and a direct line to people who care. That's the magic of newsletters. They give you permission to build at your own pace, in your own voice, with your own values.
And that permission is a gift, especially in a world that's always rushing, always shouting. A newsletter is where you whisper and people lean in. That's the power of permission-based attention. It's quiet, but it moves mountains.
So I doubled down. On quality, on care, on the craft. Not just because it grew the list, but because it made me proud of the list. Every subscriber wasn't a number. They were a name, a story, a potential transformation waiting to happen.
That shift, from numbers to names, changed how I approached everything. I stopped writing to impress and started writing to serve. And the funny thing? That's when the newsletter started growing faster than ever.
Because people can feel the difference. They can sense when you're chasing clout versus when you're building something meaningful. The former gets attention. The latter earns loyalty. I chose loyalty every time.
And loyalty leads to longevity. When you earn that kind of trust, people stick around even when your content changes, even when your frequency dips, even when you evolve. Because what they trust isn't the format. It's you.
That's the creator advantage newsletters give us. They're not rented space. They're owned relationships. You don't need to feed the algorithm. You just need to feed your readers with honesty, relevance, and care.
I started thinking of my newsletter like a garden. Some seeds grow fast. Others take time. Some ideas bloom instantly. Others lay dormant until the timing's right. But if you keep tending to it, something beautiful always grows.
And that beauty compounds. Readers turn into customers. Customers turn into evangelists. Evangelists turn into partners. It all begins with a single email and the courage to keep sending them.
Of course, not every email is a win. Some fall flat, some get unsubscribes. But I stopped seeing that as failure. Every send is a rep. And the more reps you get in, the stronger your voice becomes.
Voice isn't something you find. It's something you practice. You shape it, refine it, and earn clarity over time. That's what makes newsletters so powerful. They're a vehicle not just for sharing your voice, but for discovering it.
And once you discover that voice, your real, clear, unapologetic voice, you stop worrying about competition. Because no one else can write your newsletter. No one else can share your lens. That's where your moat is.
So if there's one thing I'd tell any aspiring newsletter creator, it's this. Your voice is your value. Don't water it down. Don't imitate. Own it. And trust that the right people will find you and follow.
And the right people do find you, if you give them something real to find. That means showing up fully, flaws and all. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. Consistently, thoughtfully, and with intention.
I look back now and realize the biggest growth levers weren't flashy. They were quiet. Honesty. Clarity. Generosity. A deep respect for the reader. That's what made people stay. That's what turned content into community.
And community creates momentum you could never buy. I've seen readers form mastermind groups, collaborate on products, even start newsletters of their own, all because of a single shared email thread. That's impact at scale.
But it doesn't happen overnight. That's the part most people underestimate. They want explosive growth in 30 days. But newsletters are a slow burn. They're not fireworks, they're campfires. Built log by log, week by week.
If you're in this game, play the long one. Build equity with every email. Not just with readers, but with yourself. Because every time you show up, you prove something. That your ideas matter. That your voice deserves space.
That's what I've learned after hundreds of sends. The newsletter isn't just a tool, it's a mirror. It reflects your growth, your mindset, your generosity. And in that reflection, others see themselves too.
So now, every time I open a blank page, I remind myself, this could change someone's week. This could unlock an idea, a client, a shift. And if I write with that in mind, the newsletter never becomes a chore. It stays a craft.
A craft I've fallen in love with. Not for the vanity metrics, but for the meaning. For the conversations. For the trust. For the feeling of building something slow, honest, and lasting in a world obsessed with speed.
That love is what keeps me consistent. Even on off days. Even when the numbers dip. Because I know one email can matter. And I never want to underestimate the power of showing up, even when it feels small.
Because small things compound. One reader becomes 10. 10 become 100. And soon you've built a brand not by going viral, but by being valuable. That's the kind of growth that actually sticks.
That's what I hope more creators understand. Growth that sticks isn't loud. It's layered. It's built in conversations, in comments, in quiet replies that say, "This helped." That's real. That's the gold no algorithm can replicate.
Because at the end of the day, your newsletter isn't just content. It's a connection, one that deepens over time. One that turns cold subscribers into warm conversations, and warm conversations into real relationships.
And those relationships? They're the foundation for everything else. Products, partnerships, opportunities. Not because you forced them, but because you earned them. With care, with consistency, with craft.
That's why we started this podcast in the first place. To peel back the curtain, to show you what audience building really looks like behind the scenes. The messy parts, the wins, the doubts, and everything in between.
And we hope, if nothing else, you walk away knowing this. You don't have to go viral to win. You just have to be valuable to the right people, over time, in your own voice, on your own terms.
So if you're writing a newsletter, thinking about starting one, or just struggling to grow, this is your reminder. Keep going. Keep shipping. Keep listening. You're building something bigger than a subscriber count.
You're building trust. You're building leverage. You're building ownership in a world where most creators rent their platforms. And that ownership? That's your unfair advantage.
And if you ever doubt the value of what you're doing, remember this. Someone out there is waiting for the exact message you haven't sent yet. Show up for them. Show up for you.
That's it for today's deep dive on Newsletter Growth Lab. If this episode sparked an idea or helped you shift your perspective, we'd love to hear from you. Seriously, hit reply or tag us on social. Your feedback fuels this entire journey.
And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, share this with a friend, and check out the archive of past episodes. This is Newsletter Growth Lab, where slow and sustainable is the new viral. We'll catch you in the next one.